You're no longer the right fit for the culture we're building. That's what Leland Faulkner said to me, sitting across a polished walnut conference table like he was ordering lunch, not ending a man's career. No warning, no performance review, no real reason. Just that line, delivered with the kind of smile that comes easy when nothing you say has consequences for you. My name is Raymond Mercer. I'm 61 years old, and up until 2 weeks ago, I was the senior logistics manager at Bexley Industrial Solutions in Grand Junction, Colorado. 19 years I gave that place. Not just work. My time, my hands, my brain, my weekends. When I started, this company was shipping out of a converted grain mill with forklifts that backfired like shotguns. We had 6 employees and a single client. Now, they've got a gleaming facility, 5 distribution partners, and a shiny new logo I designed myself. I was there before the branding, before the automation, before the venture capital. Hell, I was there before Leland knew how to tie his own damn tie. When he called me in that Monday morning, I thought maybe it was about the new regional routing plan. I'd spent the weekend fine-tuning the numbers, ran projections down to the decimal. I brought the folder with me, held it in my hands like it mattered. But the second I walked into that room and saw Vanessa from HR already seated, hands folded too neatly, eyes avoiding mine, I knew something was wrong. Leland stood up like he was playing a part he'd rehearsed. "Raymond, thanks for coming in. Please have a seat." He didn't even look at the folder in my hand. Didn't ask a single question. Just slid a manila envelope across the table like a poker player tossing a losing hand. Inside were papers, terms, a severance package, a paragraph written in legalese that tried to make what they were doing sound reasonable. He said, "This isn't about your performance. It's about alignment, vision. The company's evolving and we need to make space for fresh energy." Fresh energy. That phrase didn't land immediately. Not until I looked up at his face and saw it there. The smug certainty of someone who thought age equaled irrelevance. He was probably 32, maybe 33, with his perfect haircut and those thin-rimmed glasses people wear when they want to look more thoughtful than they are. He had a $300 hoodie under a blazer and shoes that had never seen a scuff in their life. "I've led this department since before we even had a barcode system," I said quietly. He nodded, polite, practiced. "And we're grateful," he replied. "Truly. But it's time to modernize. We're building something leaner, more agile. The future doesn't wait. Ray, 30 minutes. That's what I was given. 30 minutes to pack up nearly 2 decades. I walked back to my office, if you can still call it that, feeling like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. Not angry, not yet. Just hollow. I opened the drawers slowly. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. I packed my favorite mug first, the one from our 10-year anniversary picnic, back when the company still acted like people mattered. Then the photo of my daughter, Allison. From the summer she helped paint the loading dock wall blue. She was 12 then. She's 27 now, married, living in Boise. Next came my sketchpad, the one I used to remap our warehouse in 2007 when we tripled our product line and no one else could figure out how to avoid pallet traffic jams. I packed all that into a cardboard box while 2 security guys I'd never seen before stood outside my door like I might make a run for it. Vanessa came by to see if I needed help. I said no. And Leland? He didn't bother to come say goodbye. But as I walked down that hallway, past the vending machines and the bulletin board I installed myself when we moved into the new space, I heard him. His voice carried through the thin glass wall of the executive wing. He was laughing. Yeah, finally cleared out the legacy guys. Some of them were still using pens. For God's sake. Dead weight. Gotta make room for real talent. That's what he called me. Dead weight. Not a man. Not a contributor. Not a builder. Just ballast. I stood there for a moment. One last moment. Listening to him gloat, still holding that box against my chest. It felt heavier now, like the years inside it had suddenly realized what was happening. I didn't say a word. Didn't look back. But I made myself a quiet promise before I stepped outside. They may have pushed me out, but they had no idea what they had just started. I didn't drive straight home. I stopped at the edge of the river park, killed the engine, and sat in silence while the sun hung low over the snow-capped mountains. My phone buzzed twice, once from my sister, once from an unknown number. I didn't answer either. My hands were still resting on the steering wheel, like I wasn't sure whether to turn around or drive into next week. When I finally got home, the house felt too still. My wife, Diane, was out visiting her sister in Montrose. She wouldn't be back until morning. That left me alone, with a cardboard box, a fridge full of leftovers, and a storm brewing behind my eyes. I set the box down on the old workbench in the garage. It sat there like a time capsule, full of tools that weren't tools. Photographs, sketch pads, old notes, memos I'd written by hand. Memories disguised as paper. I opened a drawer, found the screwdriver I'd had since my first job in Oklahoma in '84. Held it like it might anchor me to something real. But it didn't. I sat on the stool, and I stayed there for hours. Not angry, not broken, just processing. They had thrown me out of my own legacy like I was a relic. Like experience was something you could replace with a 2-week onboarding and a Slack channel. At around 9:30 p.m., I finally opened my laptop. I pulled up the severance documents, every clause, every line. They used cold words like operational transition and strategic streamlining. But all I saw was this. They didn't fire the position. They fired me. No one was taking over my duties. They had already assigned them, split among 3 younger employees who, last I checked, were still asking me how to interpret the shipping log filters. I clicked off the screen and leaned back. I had trained all of them, every last one, from Caleb in inventory to Martin on the truck schedules. They had all learned under me, and now they were supposed to carry the weight of what I built without ever understanding how the pieces fit together. It wasn't just insulting. It was dangerous. But also, I knew what it was. A setup. They didn't let me go because I wasn't good at my job. They let me go because I didn't look like what Leland wanted on his website banners. I didn't speak in buzzwords. I didn't post thought leader threads on LinkedIn. I knew how to run a 4,000-item operation blindfolded, but I wasn't the brand. And here's the thing they always forget when they do this kind of thing. We pay attention. We see who's leaving. We hear whispers in the break room. We notice which birthdays get left off the HR newsletter. We see the pattern. And as I sat there, in that quiet garage with a busted fan overhead and the smell of motor oil in the air, I realized something else. I wasn't the only one. Something was happening at Bexley, and I wasn't about to go quietly. The first person I called was Carlos Denton. Carlos had been with Bexley just a year longer than me, ran our heavy equipment calibration team. If there was a machine with moving parts in that facility, Carlos knew how to take it apart, fix it, and put it back together with his eyes closed. He was 64, gruff, always wore a faded Denver Broncos cap, and carried himself like a man who didn't owe anyone an explanation. We hadn't spoken outside of work in months, but when he picked up, his voice was flat. "Ray, they got you too, didn't they?" Silence. Then a short exhale. "Thursday," said. I was too manual-minded. Whatever the hell that means. What reason did they give? He laughed once, dry, tired. "Same line they probably gave you. Restructuring. Position redundancy. I've got a copy of the letter. Looks like it was written by someone afraid of their own shadow. That made 2 of us." The next call I made was to Miriam Polk, head of procurement. She was 59, sharp as a tack, always had a to-do list taped to her forearm with painter's tape. She picked up right away. "Raymond," she said, and I could already hear it in her voice. "I've been waiting for this call. They let you go?" "They invited me to transition into a voluntary departure. Said my skills were better suited for smaller-scale operations." I asked them what that meant, and Vanessa from HR turned beet red. Leland just grinned. "How long ago?" "Last Monday." So now it wasn't just me, or Carlos. It was Miriam too. 3 of us. All over 55. All gone in the same 10-day window. All let go under language carefully designed not to say the quiet part out loud. I pulled out my own termination letter and compared the phrasing from memory. Realigned operational focus. efficiency-driven resource management, future-forward staffing, corporate poetry. But the story behind the words was simple: out with the old. The next morning, I drove down to Zeke's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like it's been brewing since 1982 and everyone knows your name, even if they don't like you. Carlos was already there, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. Miriam arrived a few minutes later with a worn leather briefcase and a look that said she wasn't in the mood for small talk. We got a corner booth and laid out our letters side by side. Same headers, same font, same phrasing, same damn date. The documents were finalized before any of us had even been called in. They didn't decide this one by one. They had a list. We just weren't supposed to know that. Miriam pulled out her phone and showed us an email, sent to her by accident from a junior HR rep named Devin. It was part of an internal thread titled, Phase 1, Workforce Renewal, Strategic Talent Shift. None of us were named directly, but there was a line that made the blood in my face go cold. Target profiles: age 55 plus, high tenure, mid to high compensation brackets. Assess for cultural adaptability and modernization gaps. Cultural adaptability, modernization gaps. They might as well have written too old, too expensive, and not trendy enough. Carlos shook his head and muttered, "We're not employees to them anymore. We're liabilities." I looked around the diner, at the booths, the napkin holders, the scuffed linoleum floors. Places like this used to be filled with people who knew the value of sticking around. Now everything was about the new, the fast, the optimized. But we weren't dead weight. We were the blueprint. And someone had decided to burn the blueprints to make space for neon signs. That's when it stopped being just personal and started being something else entirely. Pattern, a strategy, and very possibly illegal. 2 days after the diner meeting, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Eli Tompkins. He used to work in IT compliance at Bexley. Quiet guy, mid-50s, wore bow ties unironically, and always brought his own lunch in a tiny cooler with an apple and a thermos. He'd taken early retirement a year ago after what he called philosophical differences with the new management. The message read, "Raymond, I heard what happened. I think you should see something. Can't send over email. Meet me tonight after 7. Corner of Pine and 9th. Don't bring your phone." I almost laughed, like something out of a spy movie, but the tone didn't sound like a joke. At 7:12 p.m., I pulled into a strip mall parking lot near an old shoe repair shop that had been closed for months. Eli was already there, standing next to a dusty blue Corolla. He looked thinner than I remembered, grayer too. He didn't say much, just handed me a thin black folder. "There's a file in there I was asked to delete 6 months ago," he said quietly. I didn't. Felt wrong. "I don't work there anymore, so you can do whatever you want with it. Just be careful." Inside the folder was a printed spreadsheet. Bexley letterhead. Internal HR memo. Title: Workforce Optimization, Confidential. I flipped through it slowly, standing right there in the parking lot under a dim security light. 17 names. Next to each one: age, tenure, annual salary, department, and a final column labeled Priority Score. Every single person on the list was over 55. Every one of them had worked at Bexley for at least 10 years. And nearly all of them had already been either terminated or restructured in the last 3 months. At the bottom, there was a note in smaller font. Phase 1 targets. Recommend non-performance-based exit language. Cultural alignment rationale preferred. Mitigate legal exposure. I stared at that last sentence for a long time. They weren't just cutting older employees. They were coordinating it, documenting it, scoring it. And the person who had signed the internal memo? Leland Faulkner. That night, back in the garage, I laid the spreadsheet next to our termination letters. Side by side, it told a story so clear it made my hands shake. This wasn't downsizing. This wasn't about performance. This wasn't about culture. This was a calculated purge. By midnight, I had already scanned everything. By 1 a.m., I had an online folder set up. By 1:30, I had sent the link to Carlos, Miriam, and two others who I knew had gone silent after their exits. The next morning, Miriam called. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. "We're not crazy," she said. "No," I replied. "We're not." Then she asked the question we were all thinking. "Do you know anyone who deals with employment law?" The lawyer's name was Deidre Langston. Miriam had a cousin in Boulder who worked at a legal nonprofit. She asked around, explained the situation in broad strokes. That led to a phone number, then a referral, and finally, a 10 a.m. appointment on a rainy Thursday morning in downtown Denver. We met her in a modest office above a bookstore that smelled like old paper and pine cleaner. No marble floors. No receptionist in a suit. Just a small brass plaque on the door that read, "Langston Employment Law. Fair is not optional." Deidre was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed and deliberate, with a calm voice and zero tolerance for fluff. She wore a dark turtleneck, wire-frame glasses, and the kind of expression that said she'd already seen the worst kind of corporate rot and wasn't interested in being impressed. We brought everything: termination letters, printouts, notes, even the spreadsheet Eli had saved. She didn't say much for the first 20 minutes, just nodded, made notes in a leather-bound pad, and kept circling the same word in the margins. Pattern. When we finished walking her through the story, she looked up slowly and asked a single question. "Did anyone ever make a comment about age?" Directly. I hesitated. Then I told her about the meeting, the one with Leland, how he leaned back in that chair and said the words, "We need fresh energy here, not tired old men sitting on decades of dust." Her pen stopped moving. "Anyone else present?" "Vanessa from HR. And two security guys." "Would Vanessa talk?" I shrugged. She looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to be anywhere else. I doubt she wanted to be part of it. Deidre leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Mr. Mercer, you and your colleagues don't just have a case. You have what we call an actionable pattern of discriminatory targeting. Between the language in those documents and the spreadsheet, this isn't just fishy, it's radioactive." Carlos leaned back, arms crossed. "So what does that mean?" "It means," she said, "we file formal complaints with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That's the first step. Once those are in process, we prepare for potential litigation. But make no mistake, this won't stay quiet." Miriam asked the question we were all thinking. Can they retaliate if we speak up? Deidre didn't even blink. "They've already fired you. That's their move. Now it's your turn." She handed each of us a small card. "Langston Employment Law. Direct line. No gatekeepers. From this point on," she said, "you don't talk to Bexley management. If they reach out, refer them to me. If they send anything in writing, forward it. If you hear anything new, from current employees, ex-staff, even rumors, you write it down and send it to me within the hour." "Understood." We all nodded. As we left her office, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, letting strips of sun cut through the gray like golden seams in old armor. I looked at Carlos and Miriam and felt it. We were no longer just ex-employees. We were witnesses. We were evidence. And we were coming for answers. 2 weeks after meeting with Deidre, word started leaking out. Not in headlines. Not yet. But in whispered conversations, back-channel texts, and long silences followed by late-night calls that always started with the same 5 words. "Can I trust you with this?" People were scared, and I couldn't blame them. Bexley wasn't just a job for most of us. It was a lifeline. A place people had built their lives around. Mortgages, kids' tuition, health insurance. And now everyone over 55 was watching their back. The first to reach out was Donnie Chin, who worked in product compliance. He was 58, meticulous, the kind of guy who caught typos in safety manuals before the manuals were even printed. He sent me a message. "Ray, they moved my position to remote only and offered it to a 28-year-old with 0 field experience. Said I was welcome to apply for the reimagined role. I didn't even get an interview." I added his name to the list. Then came Elaine Barrett, 60, materials manager for almost 15 years. She had trained half the procurement team, including the one who replaced her after her position was retired due to realignment. Same language, same silent exit. Same pattern. By the end of the week, we had 9 names. All over 55. All let go or reassigned into obsolescence. And every one of them had glowing performance reviews from the past 3 years. I met with Carlos and Miriam again. This time in the back of a quiet cafe on the edge of town. We spread out the names, the roles, the dates like puzzle pieces on a war table. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was a culling. Carlos pointed at the list. They're scrubbing the top layer off the company. The memory layer. The people who remember how things were built. He wasn't wrong. And that's when Jennifer Rowe called. Jennifer had been in HR since before I joined. Steady, smart, avoided drama like it was poison. I hadn't heard her voice since the day I was fired. But when she called, it trembled. Raymond, I don't know who else to talk to. I met her at a park bench outside the old courthouse, just after sundown. She sat with her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. I'm not supposed to be talking to you, she said. I know, I said. But you're here anyway. She nodded, glanced around, then pulled something from her purse. A folded piece of paper. I printed this before I left. I couldn't live with it on my conscience. It was a chart, internal HR projection. At the top, Q3 Staffing Optimization Project Legacy. 17 names. All older employees. Same priority score metric as Eli's spreadsheet. Same recommendation column. Phase out via strategic repositioning or performance-based exit. At the bottom, Leland's initials. And one line, scribbled in pen. Minimize disruption. Avoid lawsuits. Keep it quiet. Jennifer looked up at me, eyes wet. I didn't sign off on this. I refused. That's why they pushed me out last week. Called it organizational thinning. Told me I could leave voluntarily or take a demotion. You kept this. I made a copy the night before I cleared my desk. Would you be willing to talk to our attorney? She didn't hesitate. I already called her. I have a meeting with Deidre next Monday. That night, I sat in the garage again, surrounded by papers, folders, names, voices. It felt like the floor beneath Bexley was starting to crack, and the people who had built it were finally pushing back. Leland had tried to erase history, but he'd made one fatal mistake. He underestimated how much of that history could still fight back. The lawsuit hit Bexley Industrial Solutions on a Tuesday morning in June. Filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and mirrored in federal court for added pressure. It named 5 plaintiffs. Myself, Carlos, Miriam, Donnie Chun, and Elaine Barrett. By 10:30 a.m., local business reporters were circling the company like vultures. By noon, someone had leaked a PDF of the spreadsheet to a tech labor blog. And by 2 p.m., Leland Faulkner was in full-blown panic mode. I wasn't there to see it myself, of course, but Kevin, one of the few younger employees still texting me, gave me a play-by-play. Bro. Leland called an emergency all-hands. Came in without his blazer. Looked like he hadn't slept. Said the accusations were baseless. That certain disgruntled ex-employees were trying to sabotage the company's momentum. Then Kevin added, but no one looked convinced. Especially not after Jennifer's name started circulating. Because Jennifer had gone on record. That Monday, she gave a full sworn statement to Deidre Langston, backed by email threads, personnel lists, and, most damning of all, a recording. 6 weeks earlier, during a closed-door planning session, Jennifer had left her phone recording by accident. Or maybe not by accident. The recording was clear. Leland's voice, casual, smug. The old guard slows everything down. They hoard knowledge, they resist change, and they make everyone else walk on eggshells. We need fresh blood, people who think in metrics, not memories. You don't build a future on rust. That quote, it was in the news by Thursday morning. Bexley's PR team scrambled. They issued a cold, generic statement about being committed to diversity and inclusion across all demographics, and investigating internal policies to ensure compliance with federal employment standards. But the internet doesn't forget. And local media doesn't forgive when a homegrown company is caught trying to discard its people like spare parts. The real blow came a few days later, when Jennifer's deposition was unsealed. Every line of it painted a picture of intent. Not just cost-cutting. Not just modernizing. Systematic age-based targeting. Carlos called me the moment the news broke. We hit a nerve. He wasn't wrong. That Friday, Deidre received a call. Not from Bexley's internal counsel, but from their insurance provider. The company's employment practices liability coverage didn't extend to intentional discrimination, and they were starting to realize just how exposed Bexley had become. 2 days later, Victor Penrose, the company's founder, former CEO, and still its board chairman, called me personally. For the first time since I'd been fired. His voice was brittle, measured. "Raymond, we'd like to discuss a path forward." Quietly, off the record. I didn't yell, didn't gloat, just said, "You'll need to talk to our attorney." And I meant it, because it wasn't just about jobs anymore. It wasn't just about getting even. It was about making sure no one else had to sit in that fake leather chair across from Leland Faulkner and be told they were no longer the right fit for a culture they had built from the ground up. The settlement talks began the following week. Deidre came prepared like a surgeon before a high-risk operation. Documents cross-referenced, timelines bulletproof, every quote and piece of evidence tagged and indexed. She didn't just bring pressure. She brought certainty. And Bexley? They brought a silence that reeked of desperation. At first, they tried to float small numbers, quiet payouts, confidentiality clauses, offers that sounded just generous enough to make some lawyer in a different case say reasonable. Deidre shut it down in 3 sentences, then handed them a counteroffer that made Leland's legal team visibly wince. Full back pay for all plaintiffs. Reinstatement offers for those who wanted to return. Punitive damages for discriminatory practices. A written public apology issued by the board. And, most important of all, Leland Faulkner's immediate resignation with no severance, no transition, and no confidentiality clause. For 2 days, we heard nothing. On the 3rd, Victor Penrose called again. He didn't bother pretending this time. "Raymond, Leland is stepping down. The board voted this morning. We're prepared to accept the settlement as outlined." I didn't speak right away. I could hear it in his voice, the fatigue, the regret. He added, almost like a confession, "I let him take too much control. I thought fresh vision meant new strength. I didn't realize he was cutting away the heart of the company." "You realized it," I said. "You just didn't stop it." There was a long silence on the line. "Will you come back?" he asked quietly. "Even just as a consultant. Help us stabilize." I exhaled through my nose, staring at the lake outside my window. Diane was sitting on the deck, a mug of coffee in hand, watching the birds. We'd bought this cabin 2 months earlier. Not out of escape, but out of choice. "No," I said. "I think it's your turn to rebuild." And I meant it. Carlos went back, just for 6 months, to help retrain the new ops team. Miriam declined. She used her settlement to start a regional logistics consulting firm. Elaine finally took a vacation to Santa Fe she'd been putting off for 12 years. Jennifer joined a workplace advocacy group. She said it felt good to build systems that protect people instead of hiding behind the ones that don't. And Leland? He vanished. Rumor was he'd moved back to Arizona, living in a condo his parents had bought him during grad school. The business world moves fast, and word travels faster. Turns out not every company wants a visionary whose last claim to fame is being sued by half his senior staff. As for Victor, he retired 6 months later. Bexley was sold to a mid-size competitor. They kept most of the jobs, restructured the leadership, and issued a quiet press release about renewed values and returning to core ethics. I kept the folder from Eli. It sits in a locked drawer in my garage. Not out of bitterness, but as a reminder. Because here's what I learned. Loyalty without accountability becomes exploitation. And legacy means nothing if you protect the wrong people in the name of progress. I didn't just walk out of that company with a cardboard box. I walked out with proof, with dignity, and with the knowledge that sometimes doing the right thing costs everyone involved. But that doesn't make it any less right. And as I sit here now, watching the light fade across the water, I know one thing for sure. I may have left Bexley behind, but I never let them erase me.